Now, we've done a few problems, we've gone through it carefully. Now, when we read a question, just quickly identify what the two quantities we are comparing is. So let's see. In one game, a certain player completed 34 passes for 357 yards at this rate, which is using the exact same ratio. How many yards would be gained? So we don't know the number of yards in 22 passes. So what are we comparing? Passes and distance in yards. Passes and distance in yards. So this is how we're going to set up the proportion. So 34 passes over 357 yards is equal to how many yards? So remember, the yards has to be in the denominator, so that's an x, in 22 passes. So make sure we have passes in the numerator, yards in the denominator. So the unknown is x, the number of yards that corresponds to 22 passes. Okay, so now let's quickly solve this. So we have 34x is equal to 22 times 357. Divide both sides by 34. So that's 22 times 357 divided by 34. So the 34 cancels and we get x all by itself. So basically at this point we've solved the equation. I'm going to check using my calculator what kind of answer we can expect. So we have 22 times 357 divided by 34. So let's make sure that we get 231. So x is equal to, and we're going to break it down to some extent, 357, 5 plus 3 is 8, 8 plus 7 is 15, so we know 3 goes into it. So let's see, 3 and 357. So what I just did was I added all the digits, and when I add all the digits it comes up to 15. I know 3 divides 15, so the 3 has to divide this number. 3 ones are 3. Bring the 5 down. 3 ones are 3. Subtract to get a 2. Bring the 7 down. 3 nines are 27. So it's 119 times 3 divided by 34, which is 2 times 17. 34 is an even number. So if we divide 34 by 2, 2 ones are 2, 2 sevens are 14, subtract to get a 0, and I know the 2 cancels, and we could give it a try to check if 17 goes into 119. If it does, that's great. So let's see, 17 times what would end with a 9? That's how I'm thinking. So the only number that I could multiply 17 with is a 7 too, so it ends with a 9. 7 sevens are 49, 4, 7 ones are 7 plus 4, 11. So that worked out. So that's 17 times 7 is 119. And we divide by 17, cancel the 17s, and then we have 21 times 11. 11 ones are 11, 11 twos are 22, so that's 231. So what does this mean? If 34 passes corresponds to 357 yards, then 22 passes has to correspond to 231 yards, which makes sense because it's slightly less than 357. So we are on the right track. Although that doesn't guarantee that our calculations are correct, we need to double check, but at least it tells us that we are on the right track. So let's look at the next one. Eric bought 111 Canadian dollars for 100 US dollars. So what are we comparing here? Canadian to US. So Canadian over US is equal to Canadian over US. So if you keep that in mind, that you're comparing two types of quantities, then you'll be able to identify it right away. If you read the question and it looks like we're comparing two quantities and then saying how many Canadian dollars can he buy with 237 US dollars. So let's start with Canadian in the numerator, US in the denominator. So that's my first sentence. 111 Canadian dollars corresponds with 100 US dollars. How many Canadian dollars? So we don't know what that is. We're going to call it X divided by 237. So now we cross multiply. So 111 times 237 is equal to 100x. Now we have to solve for x, which means we get x by itself. And for that, we need to divide both sides with 100. 111 times 237 over 100. And we have x equals 111 times 237 divided by 100. Again, at this point, we are technically done. We've solved for x. In your next class, you would be able to enter this into your calculator and get it done. But here, we're going to think about how we can use all the techniques that we've learned in this class to simplify this quickly. Now, if you see a power of 10 in the denominator, then it's worth spending the time multiplying these two numbers. Try not to cancel, because dividing by a power of 10 is easy. It's just a matter of shifting the decimal point 2 places to the left. So it's worth simplifying and multiplying these two numbers. That's a 1. 732. I'm multiplying with a 1. I shift, I multiply with this one. 732. I shift, multiplying with this one, which means I put 2 zeros because it's in the hundreds place, and then 732. So 7, 8, 9, 10. So that is 7, 8, 9, 10 plus 3, 13. 3 plus 3, 6. 26307 equals x. 26307 equals x. And now we have to divide this by 100 to get the final answer. Remember, x equals 26307 divided by 100. Without the decimal point, what it means, if it's a whole number, that the decimal point sits at the end. Every 0 in the denominator, which means if we divide by 100, we shift the decimal point 2 places to the left. So it's going to become x equals 263.07. This looks like a decimal point. Let me see if I can erase it. It's not a decimal point. Okay. So this is, now let's think about what this means. It means that 263.07 Canadian dollars corresponds to, is equivalent to 237 US dollars. Here again, we're going to set up a proportion. Proportion is a ratio equal to a ratio. A over B equals A over B, or A prime over B prime. So two different ratios on two sides. Make sure these two correspond, these quantities correspond. So let's first see what exactly is given to us and which two quantities we're comparing. Approximately 24 out of 100 Americans over the age of 12 smoke. Okay, so 24 out of 100 Americans smoke. So what this means is it's giving us a ratio. This is 24 smokers out of a total of 100 people. So every time you see something like this is nothing but a 24%. 24% of the American population over the age of 12 smokes, which means 24 out of 100 smoke, which means out of a total of every 100 people, 24 smoke. So smokers over total is the ratio. And in a group of 850 Americans, which is the total number of Americans, over the age of 12, which is the population, how many do you expect to smoke? Which means we don't know what that is. How many smoke, which means what is X, the number of smokers, if the total number of Americans is 850. So we set up an equation, smokers over total equals smokers over total. 24 out of 100 Americans smoke, which means 24% of Americans smoke. If there are a total of 850 Americans, how many smoke? So we don't know what X is. X is the number of smokers in a total of 850. We cross multiply just like before. 24 times 850 is equal to 100x. Now we divide both sides by 100 because we're trying to get x by itself. Divided by 100 is equal to 100x over 100. Cancel common factors. So x is equal to, and we cancel, and this is 24 times 85. I could either multiply these two together and divide by 10, because dividing by 10 is easy. I could do that. Or I could cancel common factors. Both are easy enough. But let me just do this. 5 times 4 is 20. 8 4s are 32. Plus 2, 34. 5 2s are 10. Carry the 1. 8 2s are 16. 17. 4, 10, 20, 40. So this is x equals, I'm just switching the sides, it really doesn't matter, 2040, which is the product of 24 and 85. I'm going to now divide by 10. So remember that this is 204 times 10, and divide by 10. The zeros cancel because both are 10s, and that is equal to 204. So what does this really mean? If there's a group of 800 Americans, you can expect 204 out of the 850 to smoke. At the end, think in a sentence. If there are a total of 850 Americans, we can expect 204 to smoke. And think about what we're comparing to, 24 out of 100 smoke. So it kind of makes sense. Think of the number. Think about whether the answer makes sense and double check your calculations. And that way you'll avoid errors. And remember to write this down so you're not switching the numerator and the denominator. Make sure you're consistent. If the number of smokers is in the numerator on the left, the number of smokers better be in the numerator on the right. If you switch the two, your answer is not going to make sense.